During our adventure game roundtable, we got on discussion about what it means to try and attract new people to a genre, and led into a very interesting conversation that we didn't really have the chance to explore on that panel, but it's something that I want to talk about today, and whether or not as a developer, or especially as an indie developer, should you focus on attracting new fans to your games. One of the more challenging aspects about being an indie developer, especially one that works with niche or very specific genres, is trying to appeal to a larger market. Because, as we all know, the more people you appeal to, the greater the chance someone's going to buy your game. And during the Adventure Game Roundtable, Corey and Lori Cole of Hero U and Quest for Glory fame were talking about the difficulties they had with attracting a new/younger fan base to their titles. Because to a younger fan, saying that you are the creator of Quest for Glory, or Age of Empires, or even maybe in some sense StarCraft, doesn't mean anything to them. And a lot of indie developers have grown up and are making games based on older genres that they particularly like, and are now finding themselves in this place of, how do I make a game that's going to be attractive to other people? And I don't necessarily agree with what Dave said on that panel, but I understand his reasoning for it, and we're going to talk about that in the next minute or so. But on the topic of how to make an adventure game appealing to new players, he basically said that he doesn't do anything. He knows that his games are very niche. They are a very specific audience. And that somebody who's going to buy a Watchet Eye game is either A, a fan of his previous games, or B, a fan of point-and-click adventures. And in that way, the onboarding to some extent is already taken care of. He knows his game is not going to appeal to, the adrenaline junkie Call of Duty fans, or somebody who likes Battle Royale and Fortnite. And he can assume that if somebody is buying one of his games, they know what a point-and-click adventure interface is. And when we talk about trying to appeal to new people, there's several different aspects we can discuss. There is the idea that this is the first game of this genre for somebody. It could be the first game of yours that this person is playing. And again, it may be rare, but it could be somebody's literal first game. Maybe somebody told them that this is an amazing game and you need to play it. And not thinking about onboarding or new players, I feel is a very big misstep from both a marketing and a design point of view. And we're going to come back to the design point of view later in this video. But from a marketing standpoint, like we said, that the more people who can appeal or who are interested in your game is ultimately going to help the sales of it. And again, this is why some of the more breakout games of the last decade have been those that have managed to either hit multiple markets or was so good in its design that it achieved a sense of mass market appeal. Games like Disco Elysium, Celeste, Stardew Valley, even some of the more quote-unquote artsy games like Return of the Obra Dinn, Papers, Please, Gone Home, and so on. And all the titles that I mentioned came from the independent space, and while they weren't particularly focused on new players of those respective genres, they did consider the onboarding, or that first user, that first look appeal of their games when building them up. And you can certainly tell when a developer does not consider that, where there are no tutorial messages, the menuing is just very basic or bare bones. There may not even be a menu at all. Some of my favorite games are when you build a platformer and don't even mention what the jump button is. Because, again, you assume that somebody who's buying your game knows that spacebar or A on the controller and so on would represent jump. But again, that is not something a new player is going to have. Now, to Dave's point, we're going to play devil's advocate for a minute and talk about why indie developers don't necessarily think about this, especially compared to the AAA and AA markets. When you're in a major company and you have teams of dozens or hundreds of people, you can afford to spend time on your tutorial, on onboarding, on making sure you do a lot in terms of focus and playtesting, so that you want your game to hit as many quadrants or whatever the market or corporate speak is in terms of mass market appeal. As an indie developer, however, if you're in a team of 10 or less, taking a month or two off to redo your onboarding or redo your menuing to hope that some new player is going to appreciate it may not be the wisest marketing or design decision for you. And this is especially true when we talk about niche-focused games and why this issue has developed in the first place. Let's say, for instance, that we are a developer and we are working on a very specific gameplay loop. And through market research and just doing polls or whatever, we can guarantee that there is 20,000 people in the world who would be interested in this game. Now, for some of you out there, you would probably kill to have 20,000 people buy your game. For others, 20,000 may not even cover 6 months of development costs. But that is your maximum number. Again, outside of those exceptions, or when a game kind of breaks through that mass market bubble, and that in of itself is another topic. So if I am focusing on only 20,000 consumers, I need to make sure that everything in my game is going to appeal exactly to them. And anything else would essentially be me gambling money and time on something that may not even bear any fruit whatsoever. Why should I spend an extra 2 to 3 months designing a tutorial if I know that those 20,000 people have played the genre into the ground? They know everything there is about it. And like we said, as an indie developer, you don't have infinite money to spend on a game. I'm sure a few of you probably have that, in your private islands as you're watching this video. But most people don't. And anything that you can do to cut costs without cutting quality is going to be a net benefit for you. Again, this is often why we see this problem when it comes to games that enter multiple years of development, and this issue of how do you earn enough money for a game that costs you 8-10 years of working either part-time or full-time on it. And even if that game is an amazing title, that doesn't mean that there is a market or a fan base big enough to support that cost. And like we said, this is also on a per genre case by case. Again, something like Filament up there is a really great puzzle game. It's a very hard one as well. But something tells me that there are going to be probably more people playing Fortnite than Filament come this fall. And this is an issue that you have to think about when it comes to developing a game. And again, when you're developing something that you know is intentionally niche, if you're trying to make something that it hasn't been in the market for a long time, or making a unique game, you have to be able to levy, what you can do versus what this market can support. And again, this is often why we see for very niche-driven games that the developers keep their profit margins as low as possible. They know not to invest in, fully voice acting or completely realistic models in their game if they're making a 2D platformer. Or if it's a visual novel style game, they know they don't need to do too much in terms of, full body motion capture. Because those elements are not interest, or they aren't going to be a focus by those fans. Now, could stuff like full voice acting and enhanced graphics bring in new people? Maybe. But again, as a game developer, it's already a gamble enough when it comes to making your video game. You don't want to throw additional risks on top of that. But as we've said, while that is certainly a strong case not to think about the new player, I do think ultimately it is important for every developer to think about what their game means to somebody who's not a hardcore fan, who hasn't spent 1,000 hours in the genre and follows it religiously like your other fans. And again, like we said, from a marketing standpoint, the games that reach pop culture appeal in some way, shape, or form do think about the new player experience, whether it's as simple as improving the UI to having a tutorial, or even in Celeste's cases, or having the accessibility mode, the cheat guide, as we've called it. These elements make these games more attractive to new fans. And it's important, again, before we move on, to mention there is a very big difference between a fan of a specific genre and a fan of a specific game. Just because somebody played Celeste doesn't mean they're going to immediately rush to N or Super Meat Boy or I Want to Be the Guy. And you have to look at what elements people are talking about when you're trying to improve playability. And again, this could easily segue into a talk about playtesting and user feedback. And that's another topic we could come back to. But after this quick break, I want to talk about why, from a design and / designer standpoint, you should really consider what it means for somebody new to play your game. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. When we talk about the games that break into the mainstream, they are not normally the most heightened or most complicated takes on their respective genres, but they do something that becomes a mass market appeal. And that can be, again, anything from the tone or topic of the game to the UI, and just a combination thereof. And as a game developer, it's very important for you to consider the new player's perspective for any game that you make, even, again, niche-driven successes. Because this could be its own topic. I don't think there is such a thing as 100% a niche genre, something that will never appeal to the mass market. We could argue that the fighting game genre for the longest time had that issue, until we saw the rise of games like Smash. And we're even seeing more fighting games today add in modes and elements explicitly designed for new players and not the super hardcore fan base. MK11 would be a really good example of that. And with something like Stardew Valley here, the footage you're seeing is, I think, a few years old, so I'm sure they've even had more refinements and improvements. But this was a game that was aimed at a very specific niche at that time. The developer wanted to make his own take on Harvest Moon. And that was a genre that, for a lot of people, they thought it was a dead genre. The AAA market moved away from it. They didn't think there was going to be enough of an interest. And his game came out of nowhere and became one of the best games of that year, and one game that is still being played and talked about to this day. Titles like Minecraft are another case. And there's a reason why more people probably know the name Sid Meier's Civilization than they know Stellaris. despite, again, the fact that Stellaris' fan base is probably more hardened and more enthusiastic because of where or how developers cater to it. But as we've said for our focus for today, that as a developer, you need to consider what a new player is going to see in your game. And ultimately, that can help you become a better designer. As we have said many times before, one of the best examples of a company that knows how to appeal to a wide market would ultimately be Nintendo. Nintendo has made some really great games that are aimed at a very wide fan base. People who have never played a Mario game can still learn and get something out of it, just as somebody who has 100%ed every 3D Mario game, or even before that, can still find something to enjoy in Odyssey. And it takes a really good eye towards design, and also a little bit in terms of psychology as well, to understand why somebody is going to enjoy your game and what elements are going to push them away. From our Adventure Game Roundtable chat, Julia was talking about working on the Crimson Diamond and how she originally designed the interface to mirror that the old, I think it's VGA graphics. Again, I did not grow up playing adventure games, so I'm kind of a novice there. But when she showed the game to people, they became frustrated and didn't know what to do because they didn't have that background. They didn't know how you control a character back then, and again, why should they? So what she did was change the control scheme to make it more appealing, make it something that somebody who's never played the game can understand and parse. As another example of this, I've spoken to developers working on Scold Against the Black Priory and Nox Arcanus. I think I may be confusing these names there. But both developers are working on modern retro takes on Apple II RPGs or CRPGs. And I am very sure that for anyone on the younger side who was born in the last 15-20 years has absolutely no idea what those games are. And one of the things that both developers have been dealing with and trying to work around is how do I make this experience something that can be enjoyed by more people who didn't just grow up playing those games. And they both looked at ways of modernizing or streamlining their designs so that if you've never touched those games, you can still pick up their games and enjoy something about them. Are you going to get the full experience as somebody who grew up playing all those titles? Probably not. But at least there is something there for a new player to kind of latch onto when they're first learning. So many indie developers make this mistake of just throwing people to the wolves and expecting them to learn as they fail. And a new player does not want to learn by failure, because they're not even going to know what step 1 of your game is, let alone step 15. And if you can't provide them with some kind of starting point for them to begin to learn your game, they are going to get tired of it, they're going to get frustrated, and they will never look at that game or you as a developer ever again. And for me, this has been one of my issues with the space sim genre. I didn't grow up playing those games. I have no fondness, no memory, no skill at them. And I keep trying to find an example of that game to kind of put me in or launch me to start enjoying those titles, and I haven't found one yet. And if anyone knows of a really good starting one, let me know in the comments below. But the problem is that each one of those games, even the very best, most highly regarded examples, are only catering to the expert fan base. Again, to the guaranteed sales. And while you do need to make your game appealing to them, in the same breath, you can't complain about why more people aren't buying your game if there's nothing for somebody new to get into there. And I think it's going to be very interesting, especially again with this decade, and with the recent announcement of the Unreal Engine becoming essentially free up to the first million in sales, to see what new and perspiring developers are going to do with it. And trying again to capitalize on this idea of, if I can take a genre that is known for being very opaque, very difficult to get into, and make an accessible and very playable version of it, will that game sell? Or will that game sell? Could we have the Stardew Valley of 4X grand strategy? Could we have the Stardew Valley of Dark Souls? Just really hit the clickbait with that one. Again, I can't really predict the future because I'm sure there are developers right now having those crazy ideas in their head and trying to figure out how do they want to take it from there. But I can already tell this video is going to be on the longer side, so we're going to wrap things up here. So to summarize, as a developer, if you want more people to buy your game, you need to look at ways to attract new people to said game. And there is so much to unpack there that we don't have the time to do. But look at playtesting, user feedback, get people who have never played your game before, who may have a minor interest, and see what they think about it. And again, the things that somebody may find frustrating as a new player may be something that experts have just kind of grin and bear for so long, but they may not really be fans of that element either. And if you can find a way to make your game easier to play while still keeping the design what attracts people, that will always lead to a stronger title than one that is just hard to get into. So, for those of you watching this right now, my question, can you think of games that have managed to break through in terms of a niche genre to achieve a more popular success, and what elements did they do to make their game more appealing? Let me know in the comments below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.